Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the ARTbopSHOW. And with us, we have local author Bryan Winters.
G'day.
Who has written a book called The Bishop, the Mullah, and the Smartphone.
That's right.
So, just before we get into, the nitty-gritty of it, would you just like to briefly give us your background?
Oh, for sure. I'm a New Zealander, and I originally trained to be a school teacher, actually. And after a few years teaching in New Zealand, I did a big jaunt overseas, in which I ended up living in Africa and teaching in the back blocks. And that was my first exposure, by the way, to living sort of within a Christian/Muslim community, a lot of Muslims. Yeah. And from there, went through England, and tell you the truth, I got turned off school in England. I thought, it was tough, so I came back to New Zealand and ended up joining IBM, which was the biggest IT company in the world in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I had a great career with them, which took me up into Asia, eventually lived in Singapore. And so, as compared to Africa, where I'd been living amongst poor Christians and Muslims, so I ended up in Asia living amongst rich Christians and Muslims.
Yeah.
And I clearly had this IT thing, which went on, and then I came back to New Zealand, and I've been involved in smaller IT companies to one degree or another.
Yeah.
And kind of really picked up on the writing a few years ago.
Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. So, writing has been mostly in the nonfiction for you, or you dabble in both fiction, nonfiction?
Yeah, good point, because I like nonfiction, but I like fiction, and I actually have some fiction books coming. But as I say to people, even fiction books have generally got a bit of non-fiction in them, because the author's drawing on their own background and just reinterpreting it and changing names and stuff like that quite often.
Yeah. So, getting to the book, The Bishop, the Mullah, and the Smartphone, how did this book evolve?
Yeah, evolve.
For you?
That's a good. Yeah, that's a good phrase, actually. Yeah. I started by, clearly, let's be honest, the world has become very aware of Islam since 9/11, 2001. So there's been a resurgence of interest and front page news, if we're honest. And I have to confess, I come from a Christian background. So I'm just interested in religions, which is, whether that's niche or not, I don't know, but just the comparing the two.
It is a fascinating topic.
Yeah, well, and I had this background in technology. And also I am a follower of a couple of influential thinkers in the 20th century, Marshall McLuhan, who talks about the medium as the message, and a lesser-known figure called Jacques Ellul, who wrote The Technological Society, The Technological Bluff, various books like that. So he's got some insights on that. So that was kind of all in my head, and out of that, as you say, came this book. But I didn't know the full structure of it when I started writing it. Evolve is a very good word.
Yeah. Yeah. So I assume it took place over a period of years, the process?
Well, the writing of it, actually, the way I write is I start something and then I'll kind of chip away at it. And with non-fiction, you can kind of you can write a chapter that's halfway through to begin with. You're not sort of caught by that. So I had this rough skeleton, and this has happened to me before with other books, and then I get this impulse, and it all comes out, man, like I write. And after that is when the hard work starts for me. because I got to go and resort it and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So I rewrote that thing 10 times because you got all these linkages in there. But however, as people have pointed out, I said there's a lot in there, and it didn't all start from when I wrote it. This is
Yeah.
a lifetime kind of, there's little stories in there that go way back to Africa and Asia and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So you reference McLuhan and what was the name of the other guy?
Ellul, E-L-L-U-L, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
In the book a lot.
Yeah, I do.
And so kind of brief us on how those ideas of like the medium is the message and things like that go into the religious framework.
Good question. McLuhan's major book is called Understanding Media, and the subtitle is The Extensions of Men.
Yes.
And that's a very key point because if you open the book up and look through Understanding Media, he talks about armaments and clearly newspapers, that's an easy one.
Right.
Motor cars, all kinds of things he talks about. And you're thinking, are these media? But if you think of them as extending the power of men. So clearly a book, for example, is a stored memory. You can write things. It extends our memory. A sword extends your power in battle.
Yeah.
So that is one of the key features because these things come up and religions adopt them, cope with them, are influenced by them. That's one of the main things.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of books, the two religions in question do have holy texts.
Yes, they do.
Which are stored memories. Exactly. Yeah. So on that note, you have the 4 M's in the book.
Yes. Yeah.
Memory is one of them.
Yes.
And could you take us through the
others, right?
Yeah,
right.
the others
Fair enough.
as well.
Well, clearly media, because the media is we've talked a little bit about that, but that's a biggie. Mimicry, I think mimicry is sort of underestimated as a feature. But if you look at religions and businesses, actually, if you take the smartphone, for example, it's interesting how they mimic each other. Take the two players, Apple and Samsung, and they both come out with version 6 of their software at the same time, and they release this. There's a lot of mimicry going on there, and yet they're competitors. And so car companies, boy, you look at a modern Chevy and a modern Ford and you can't tell them apart.
Right.
And so when you come to religion, same principles there, and that's why, you see this picture of, there's a very fascinating scenario in the middle of Istanbul. We've got the Hagia Sophia, which was the original grand cathedral of Christendom, and just down the road there's the Blue Mosque. But if you didn't know the difference, I mean, they look the same.
Yeah.
And so mimicry in religion is a big thing. So that's mimicry. That's the third one. Again, we talked about memory.
Yeah.
But I got to refer back to memory. Also, the memory not only of us but of the world is hugely increasing with the power of computing.
Yeah, and so like in that in the book you say active remembering, active forgetting, and passive remembering and
passive forgetting.
Yeah. So like are those? I was fascinated by like those concepts.
They're not mine. I borrowed them.
Right.
The cultural theorists. And the book gives credence to them on that.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's very true.
I think it's
in terms of different medias and how we remember some and don't remember others.
You can take it outside the religious context. You can take it to anywhere, and it's a nice little understandable thing, isn't it? Because we lose something, we've forgotten about it. A pot gets buried and it's passively forgotten, as averse to actively forgotten. And like the Soviet Union was very good at that. They were the first ones during Stalin's era to pull people out of photographs. So there's this
Right.
famous one where there's a photograph of this guy walking along with Stalin and his henchmen, and then later on, in the next couple of years later, he's been purged, and he's not in the photo anymore. He doesn't exist.
Right.
That is active forgetting. We're gonna get rid of that guy's memory.
Yeah, from like the culture.
As
a result of manipulating photographs.
Yes, it's an example of active forgetting.
Yeah. And like I find it interesting because as you also point out, there is such a thing as cultural memory and cellular memory.
Yes.
Which is kind of, like in the book you give the example of the heart transplant.
Yeah, we're treading on. Let's start with the cultural memory. Come to cellular memory. Because we could sort of get a bit spaced out on that.
That's a huge spectrum, isn't it?
Yeah, cultural memory is a well sort of grasped concept. That there is a whole culture in it, and it remembers things a long way back. And the further back it remembers, the more stickability it's got. That seems to be the case.
Yeah.
So if you take the example of Russia again, so Russia had a long, long history of Orthodox Christianity, and then it was meant to come to an end in 1917 when they all saw the light and became communists. And communists in that era were really, atheistic. They wanted to get rid of the church.
Yeah.
And for 70 years they oppressed that church. Now 70 years is an entire life of a person, really. You'd think in 70 years you could get rid of it. But somehow that Orthodox Church clung on, it compromised, it did all sorts of things, with the regime. And when communism fell, bang, it bounced back into life because it was deep in the culture of that entire population.
Yeah.
So that's a good example of the power of cultural memory. Cellular memory, of course, this is a new one because we are, we've heard these stories, the girl has the heart transplant and from a murdered victim, and somehow she has these flashbacks and they're able to ping the...
recalls.
They're able to ping the murderer.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stories like that, and it's kind of a bit... it's not right in the scientific realm now, but I think it's becoming a thing that you can't ignore. There's a lot of people interested in it. And in any case, just to come back to the cultural thing, in the past 20 years, the very phrase, hearts and minds, well, what does that mean? How can you get someone's heart? You can get their mind, but it's intertwining them together. So it's becoming common talk.
Yeah, because one of the things that those concepts reminded me of is, have you heard of Rupert Sheldrake's theory of the morphogenetic field?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, it's a new one.
It's a fascinating theory, which basically says that information travels through this thing called the morphogenetic field.
Okay.
In which, if one person in Istanbul does something new, then someone on the other side of the world would be able to do it faster, better, more quickly because it has already been...
It's been done.
Yeah, it's been done. And that has traveled through this... morphogenetic field. And they've done experiments with rats.
Wow.
And things like that on other side of the world.
Yeah.
Going through the same maze with the same kind of obstacles. Once it was accomplished in one part of the world, the other part was able to do it faster and
right.
more.
And that rat didn't know. The second rat didn't know about it.
Didn't know anything.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that, I found it fascinating because that also pours over into things like, mimicry and all sorts of...
There's a whole lot of things.
Yeah.
I mean, and the twins thing, one twin gets electrocuted and the others is 300 miles away and they get a severe jolt.
Yeah.
The identical twin. There's a lot of stuff we don't understand.
It's strange stuff.
Well, you got to be careful in a book like mine to float into that, and that's why I just sort of mention it with caution.
Yeah. But in terms of religion, in both the case of Islam and Christianity, because of they've existed for so long, there is definitely aspects of that memory,
yes,
either stored, cellular, cultural, that is still present very much within our
and always has been. I mean, and the acceptance of things, but in this case, this is not populations that don't know about each other. They know about each other, eh?
Yeah.
So, for example, the very adoption of a book you talked about, the book, it took Christianity a long, long time to get onto a book. And in fact, and I mentioned in there how Plato was a bit suspicious of books.
Of the books,
because all it did was give knowledge to a learner, and the learner could go around and read from the book and kind of boast about his knowledge, sort of thing. And, he hasn't really learnt that. So it took a long time for the book to
catch on.
To catch on, and by the time you come to the 6th century, we've got these icons of Jesus holding a book. Books didn't even exist in Jesus' time.
Right.
He's fused to this book, and all the paintings in Constantinople, which is remarkably close to Arabia, so therefore all those layers, I call them layers of media, they've been laid down. So from the death of Muhammad to the Quran is 10 years. That's it. That's remarkably quick. That's, like Christianity took hundreds, if not thousands of years to compile its book.
Yeah. And
it took the Muslims 10 years.
Yeah. So it's kind of it's kind of interesting, that acceleration of adopting media.
And not only that, but divinizing it. It actually became divine, which is why people scoff at these newer religions like the Jedi Church and various things like that. But as we move into this video age, the book is kind of being taken over by movies.
Right. Which is also a thing that you mention about the census. How a whole lot of people put down Jedi as their religion.
Yeah, and in New Zealand, the very country we live in, one of the census had over, I think, for example, there were 36,000 Muslims in the country at that stage, and Islam is on the tick box. It's got a tick box there, and then there's other. And 20,000 New Zealanders wrote Jedi, because Jedi wasn't on the tick box, kind of thing. And they've got hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. Now, people would say, "Oh, don't be ridiculous! You can't make a religion based on a movie." But my point is, what would Plato have said? Would Plato have said, "Don't be ridiculous! You can't make a religion based on a book"?
Right.
But it's a media article.
Yeah.
And as we're finding, in fact, they've done studies, at least in Denmark, and they've discovered that, and they measured it, researched it, that more people learnt spirituality from Lord of the Rings movies than they did from the Bible or the Quran.
Wow.
Or the Da Vinci Code, these sort of things.
Right.
Which is a book made to look like a movie. It's an action. Which is part of the McLuhan thing, really. The medium is the message.
Because the thing is that in the time of Plato, book was a new medium.
It was a brand new medium. Well, for a start, there was no book. There were scrolls.
Yeah, scrolls.
Yeah. And
then it became the Codex.
And then the Codex, the Codex was, say, 100, 200 AD. Not BC. So, I mean, it's a very interesting point there, and we might be diverting, but take the scrolls. A scroll can only hold so much information, and a book can hold a lot more. So here's a Bible here, and in this Bible there are actually 66 books, separate books, which
Yeah.
was once 66
Scrolls.
separate scrolls. And these scrolls were all bundled in the corner. And you went over and you pulled one out, and they were
Right.
not in sequential order.
Yeah.
Okay? When you come to the book, they're put in sequential order in the Bible.
Yeah.
And this is very significant for Christians because there's a tendency to think, oh, well, the oldest one is at the beginning and the newest one is at the end.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. It's not even in historical order. And so Christians have a bit of a issue with that, but it was never
Yeah.
meant to be that way. This is a media construct.
Yeah, and as you mentioned in the book, that the books were kind of reordered as the Bible evolved.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah.
The letters of Paul are just stuck in there with the biggest one first.
Right.
They're not in any historical sequence.
Yeah. And then the ones with historical sequences
Yep.
is different than what you get in.
Absolutely, I mean, Genesis, for example, is at the beginning of the Bible, but it's not the oldest book. The oldest book is the book of Job, which is a story about the Middle East. It's not even about Israel.
Right.
So, and it's stuck in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting, because I could only imagine, if the book is a brand new medium,
Yeah.
the task at hand for people to put things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Well, they didn't have media studies 101.
No.
Plato didn't teach that.
no, exactly, and that's why at the beginning it was all handwritten compilations, correct? And then
Yes.
the printing press came along and
Yep.
made things more complicated.
Well, it simplified things, and clearly, even reproducing a scroll, it takes effort, and they were highly trained, and also in the Islamic world. So at one point in time in Istanbul, there were 90,000 copyists of the Quran making a living.
Right, just
So
doing that.
Just copying it.
Yeah.
And they would all be highly trained. So you've got a whole, dare I call it an industry or a profession or something like that.
Yeah, of
knocking out these
copyists.
things. Yeah, and there was a bit of that in Europe as well. And of course the Europeans, they're very colourful. They got in, their Bibles were works of art, the calligraphy and stuff like that. And a few of those still have survived. So when we move from that on to the printing press, there's a lot in that, because you imagine, first of all, if you've taken all the effort to copy that Bible, to burn that Bible, whoa, man, that is a major, so
Yeah.
it's pretty easy to understand. To burn that Bible is a sin.
Yeah.
It's evil because,
Yeah.
it's the word of God. So,
Right.
but actually, look at all the effort I put into it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of a dick
They're
move
hard
to the
come
author.
by.
Yeah, if you put all this effort into one copy and made it a work of art,
Yeah.
if anyone burnt it,
Yeah.
if I was the author, I would be kind of pissed.
Absolutely. It's either a despicable act or deliberate.
Yeah.
Because again, we want to get rid of a memory, and there are only 5 copies of this thing out there, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So you burn all 5.
Right.
Yeah. So when we get to the printing press, that changes a number of rules, doesn't it? One is you can mass produce these things. And the second one is you'll never be able to track them all down and burn them all. It's too many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, would you say that the printing press was the first kind of mass media?
In the West, yeah.
Yeah.
And in actual fact, I understand the Chinese had sort of a printing press.
Okay.
But that's...
Which predates...
Yeah. They were able to
and-
knock things out, but I don't... That's not part of this book. So, yeah, for me, it's quite a simple thing. Protestantism their mantra is sola scriptura, which is a sole reliance on Scripture.
Yeah.
And for you to have a sole reliance of Scripture, A, you have to be able to read it, and B, you need a Bible.
Yeah.
So you've got to, and those two things go hand in hand.
Yeah.
If you're going to teach a class of kids to read, they all need a book. And if they're all handwritten, that's pretty hard to do, kind of
Yeah.
thing. Rightio. So the printing press comes out, and that enables a whole denomination to bypass a religious leader. You don't need a church or a religious leader to tell you what to do anymore. You can find it in the book. So Protestantism doesn't need a pope.
Yeah. And that would have raised like literacy levels as well within the populations because it was of this mass.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that it's easy to look back and castigate the church for various things, but they were the educators in Europe in the Middle Ages, without a doubt. And they taught people to read, and they had a book, that you could, and they also had others, by the way. They didn't ignore the Greek text or anything like that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So see, because one of the things, I forget whom I was listening to, but they were kind of talking about the fact that because of the printing press, as opposed to handwritten manuscripts, it made like language and like literacy and spread of information more possible because of, I guess, the lettering.
Yes.
Yep. You cannot tell one A apart from another A because they're all been printed from the same.
Yes, true. Becomes easier to read, I suppose, rather than handwriting, eh?
Yeah.
From that point of view. Although those, yes and no, because those early copyists were highly trained in calligraphy. So even though they were like artists, so every A of theirs looked pretty much
consistent.
99% the same. Yeah, we're not talking about a bunch of doctors writing things to take to the chemist.
Right. No, absolutely. So that's kind of interesting that going from that, because you mentioned in the book that in the East or Islam was much later to adopt the printing press.
Yeah. The printing press developed in Northern Europe.
Yeah.
And a bunch of entrepreneurs in Venice. And Venice is a key city. It's a trading link.
Yeah.
With the ships to the Middle East, and they saw this thing and they, wow, we can sell this to the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
So they hurriedly knocked out one. This is not a good startup idea here, eh? But they hurriedly knocked out a Quran, and it was a bit shoddy, but they just wanted to get the thing over there, early market idea. Anyway, the Ottomans hated it, and they had various, like the printing presses, there's pig bristles in it, and they had all these, complaints, because pig is not an animal they like, kind of thing.
Right.
And they rejected that on pain of death. You could not print the Quran. And, of course, they were also fixed that this is the Word of God. This is the Word of God, and the Word of God deserves more than a machine to reproduce it. It requires the hand of a trained copyist.
Yeah.
So for approximately a couple of 100 years, they got away with that. And eventually, I think it was in the mid-18th century, 1729, things started to turn around, and they started to relax that because the increasing power of Europe, was evident, and that restriction against copying died away. And here we have, here's a Quran, believe me, printed on a printing press.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that prohibition against printing is forgotten, is gone. It's just whether it's actively forgotten or passively forgotten.
Yeah.
But people would laugh at that today.
No, that's absolutely true, because that's one of the things in the book as well, which you talk about. That was, I guess, disruption to the Ottomans' view of
disruption is a sort of a theme
throughout
rolling through, and media is a big disruptor. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
And I mean, disruption occurs on many levels, on a political level, on a military level.
Yeah.
And for example, one of the themes of disruption that comes up in the book was the Ottoman Empire fundamentally taken over the Mediterranean trade routes.
Yeah.
You know, they went out there and they had these pirates, and these pirates just decimated anything that sailed in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And that was the highway. You see, it was in those days. It was better to ship things by sea. That was the motorway.
Yeah.
And that was, according to an influential writer in the 1930s, he sort of pointed out that after that, the power shifted to Northern Europe. And Northern Europe, interestingly, got good at sailing in rough oceans. And they started to go around the world and do things like that. The sailing empires.
Yeah.
So if it was disrupted back in the Mediterranean, it was a bit of a lake. You know, you didn't have to be too smart to sail around the Mediterranean. You're going to bang into land sooner or later, right?
Yeah.
But you try going to New Zealand or India on one of those boats.
Right.
So disruption causes mankind to think of a new answer to things, you see.
Yeah.
And that new answer always has ramifications.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is one of the things that I wanted to ask you is that, you know, nowadays secularism is on the rise.
Yep.
Correct? And like religion, you can say, is declining.
You might say that, except if you look at the numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, kind of, and you know, earlier you said that people are learning spirituality from movies,
Yes,
and things like that. So, like, how do you see, like, is there a link?
Okay.
Between those things?
There's no simple answer, but let's say that, broadly speaking, secularism is on the rise in the West. So here, secularism is impacting Christianity or Christendom probably more than it is impacting Islam. And in that regard, there's a lot more people in Western societies. Going back to the census box, there's a box there now called none. And there's a lot more people ticking N-O-N-E, not N-U-N. N-O-N-E. And they're called the nuns. It's the rise of the nuns. So you ever look in America now, and it's interesting. It's not atheism. They're not ticking that box.
Yeah.
These are none. And the nuns are not, they don't say who they believe in. There's none. And so that's impacting the West. But the West isn't the only player here, because that's not the major reproducer of mankind anymore. You know, it's flat population growth there. So if you go to Asia and Africa, Christianity is booming, and South America has been traditionally pretty Christian anyway. Yeah. But there are people who say that, like China, the church in China is huge. Yeah. It's not sort of, it's semi-underground. It used to be what they call the underground church. And as for Africa, man, it's well underway. Yeah. Now, it's a different form of Christianity from the West, but it's on the grow in those places.
Because there's also a big South Korean Christian community.
Yeah, there are two huge, three big Christian success stories in Asia. The first was the Philippines, which got taken over by Spain. Yeah. And the Philippines, similar model to South America, became Roman Catholic. That was a long time ago. Yeah. But the two Protestant success stories are South Korea and Singapore. I mean, man, you find mega churches. Yeah, Singapore. You find mega churches. I've been to one, man. 2,000 people a time coming in, 6 services on a Sunday. It's 24,000. You know, that's 12,000. Sorry. Yeah. Get my maths right. And so they've you know, whereas say that Islam is dying is not true.
No.
Pew Research, and Pew Research are the leaders in collecting these statistics, and they tell us it's going to be, I forget the exact one just in the interview, but it's something like 35% growth in the next, by 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
So they'll move
Fascinating.
above 2 billion adherents. And yet, I've got a newspaper article I reference from the 1880s out of Sacramento, USA, in the book, and it's talking about almost the death of, they called it Mohammedanism in those days.
Yeah.
And they were down to like just the hundreds of millions. It was only like a couple of 100 million Muslims left. I don't want to use the word left. I'm not being disrespectful here, but that was the statistics. And boom, we're going to be 2 billion shortly.
Wow. So, like, I guess it's not on the decline. It's
Islam
quite
is
the
not
opposite.
on the decline, and neither is Christianity.
Yeah.
Christianity is actually still the world's largest religion, 2.1 billion believers. Islam 1.7, and Christianity is probably still the fastest growing because of the African and the Asian scenario.
Yeah. Speaking of which, just to switch topics a little bit, you mentioned the large church services.
Yep.
And in the book, there is mention of, I guess, the architecture or the images that are present in church buildings and the acoustics.
Yes.
The sound and image.
Yes, yeah, it's a fascinating thing to explore, isn't it? And just take the medium of stone and how sounds bounce around within a stone building. Because of course, most of our history and most of religious history, by definition, was in a non-electric age.
Yeah,
and we've got so used to electricity that we can't imagine this world without it. But if you're constructing a cathedral, anywhere up until literally the 1800s, it's going to be based on natural sound amplification.
yeah,
And these people who built those things, they had hundreds of years of experience. And so the Hagia Sophia, which is that grand church, that could bounce a sound around for up to 10 seconds. I mean, that must be phenomenal. And you've got this chanting thing
like
in there.
And
yeah. And just the other day, actually, I was running this past an architect, and there's no firm answer on this. I said, well, did they sort of realise that sound was bouncing around, and did that kind of enhance their chanting? Did the chanting develop because, oh, wow, listen to how the sound bounced, and it improved? Now, we don't know, but it's an interesting thought, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's kind of, and like in the book you mentioned that, like, that kind of having a sense of awe.
Yeah.
When you enter a church, mosque, or even a Hindu temple.
Yep.
Some of those temples are
the numinous feeling, eh?
Yeah.
And personally, I find the minimalist ones the most awe-inspiring, eh? You go into something like St. Peter's and it's got paintings everywhere and it's kind of like a huge work of art. But I went into one in France and it was so minimal, man. It just had a little Madonna at the end and everything was stripped out and there's just this low light. I tell you what, whoa, and tough men walking through this, and one of them said to me, "Ooh, that was moving," and he was a religious guy, eh?
Right.
So, you can scoff at that, but it does impact people.
Yeah.
And
there is something to that.
There is something to that, and it's within the Islamic thing too, And I tell my personal experience of walking up into that huge big mosque in Delhi, going past all the beggars and everything. I come into this mosque and wham, wow, whoa, big flat area. It was just it does something to you.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it has to do with that, image, or like the environment and all those kind of elements portrayed within that.
Yes, it's all part of it. It's the whole architecture and symbology is a huge area. I've got a coffee table book at home, and it's full of pictures of these different religions, not just Islam and Christianity, but it talks about this very thing, think about voices without microphones. That's an easy way to start with this, eh? So if you want to speak to a crowd, you want your words to travel. So clearly, when you build a church without microphones, you've thought about how you've got to be able to speak to 300 people who, by the way, don't have a book because there's no printing press. Okay,
right.
So
it's just your word.
Yeah, you've got to kind of think about those things.
Yeah,
and of course, bring in the microphone and air conditioning, and you've got a totally different. I mean, the modern church today is just filled with electronic paraphernalia. It's like a rock show.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say, that those original preachers must have been the first rock stars.
Yeah.
Standing in front of the stage and,
I know. Yeah.
Letting the word be known.
Yeah.
But so in regards to that, you mention in the book also kind of text reliant cultures and image oriented cultures.
Yes, well, that's a good point.
Yeah,
because and there is a significant difference, I suppose, between Christianity and Islam, because Christians never had a thing against images. So if you go into a cathedral, you'll see all these stained glass windows, which are essentially images. No problem at all with images. And they turn them into comic strips. Actually.
Yeah, exactly. Those were the original comic books on massive stained glass windows.
And when you think about it, a very effective medium, because they didn't have the printing press, so they couldn't get that out. People didn't read, but they could look at pictures and they could go past those stained glass windows generation after generation. It was a very effective teaching aid, and you had to be inside the church to see them.
And also, it just looks beautiful.
Oh, it does. It does. There's no question about that.
Getting into that awe
and that would have
images.
been the church would have been the best looking place in the town, apart from the palace. But you didn't tend to get into that, eh?
Right.
But those things. As you go over to Islam, and they have purportedly had a thing against imagery, which is interesting because there are lots of images, actually. There's lots of early paintings about Muhammad sitting up there. But you put those aside, they focus on the text. And so what a lot of people don't realise is that the Quran, written in Arabic, and Arabic is a sort of a flowing, quite beautiful looking language. And you go into a mosque and you see all these curvy designs. Well, actually, they're verses out of the Quran.
Yeah.
So just as you could read your way around a church through these pictures, you can read your way around the Quran through the writing on the wall. Yeah. It's Arabic. And so there's some similarities and differences.
Yeah. And also, as you say, that, I guess it's kind of related to the memory thing, is that the Quran is to be recited.
Yes. Yes, it is.
And so all this kind of beautiful language, and it's almost like the poetry of it.
It is.
Serves the same purpose, I guess, as studying the Bible or looking at images.
Yeah. And again, there's no general answer here.
Yeah.
Except that Muslims recite the Quran a lot more than Christians recite the Bible. Now, someone's going to point out, that's wrong. But because Christians do read from the Bible, so I'm not giving a general thing here. They'll stand up and they'll read a few verses from it, one thing and another. But to the Muslim, it's the reciting, the cadence, the flow of it, and
the poetry
of it, and this is interesting because that sort of almost touches on poetry and music. Where's your dividing line there? Because traditionally they've had some of the Muslim community have a thing against music, and yet their recitation is so close to that. Right,
exactly. But you're right, it's kind of interesting that even in the Hindu tradition, which is my background, there is a lot of emphasis on song and
Okay.
dance and, kind of, I guess, like the poetry of religion.
Yes, yeah. Well, I suppose that explains all those dances on the walls on Angkor Wat, and those sort of places.
Yeah. And so, like it's kind of interesting because did hymns and those kind of things evolve later on in Christianity? Or like, was it a part of the...
No, hymns actually go way. Think of Psalms. There's these places in the Bible called Psalms, and they were actually sung.
Yeah.
So Christianity has this history which goes way back into, we'll call it Judaism or Hebrews or ancient Israel. So they had those, and therefore there was no problem in doing hymns and songs, but who's going to learn them off? How are you going to learn them off? And so there's sort of choirs and chanting and various things like that. But the printing press, that enables you to stick in the hands of everyone in the church this book full of hymns.
Yeah.
And so the printing press did a number of things. It's interesting that seating came into the churches. In those early cathedrals, they didn't even have pews.
Yeah, you mentioned
you're sitting on a stone floor, right? It's just a big area, and perhaps that's related to the I don't know what, But you can sort of understand. The printing press comes along, the hymn books are there, and now in our age, the hymn books have been around for like several hundred years.
Yeah.
So you've got these people, and talking about embedded memories, you can have old people who've had a lifetime of churches, and they might lose their mind. And I've done this, with older people. Just start singing to them a hymn, like Away in a Manger, and they'll catch on. And all, however many verses will come out of their head, out of a person that you thought was gone, because they're deeply embedded, and the power of music is very strong.
Yeah. And it kind of like engages different parts of the brain as well in terms of the storing of memory.
Absolutely, it pulls a tune with the lyrics. And that's one of the great powers of music,
as opposed to absorbing text, which is absorbed differently into memory.
It is, but I'm a firm believer that if you give, say, if you teach a hymn to 2 or 3 or 3 generations, it seems to take your thing again, and it becomes easier to learn or what have you.
It's carried through that field, like through genetics or whatever it is that it's carried through.
And unfortunately, or for whatever, let's not put a moral thing on this, with the modern world, the hymn book's being ditched because it's a throwaway world. You use something a couple of times and chuck it away. So now a lot of modern churches are on this bandwagon of every Lincoln Sunday there's a new bunch of songs up there with a band, and you can't actually give out a hymn book because it's only going to last a few weeks or months, and you've got the next one coming up. There's a few machines around the world that churn out these things, like Hillsong, they churn out new numbers and various people like that, and those songs don't stick.
Yeah.
You don't. The church people don't remember those, and so in 50 or 70 years' time, those people that all had all these, they won't be able to sing Away in a Manger. It never kind of got into them. This is disruption, media disruption in the church.
Yeah, exactly, and kind of going deeper into that in that sense of disruption and active memory.
Yep.
Recently, because of the internet or computing and compared to books, which are also stored memories, the amount of data that we are now storing is incredible.
It is.
In comparison.
It is. It's doubling according to various figures every 2 years. It's phenomenal to think that that in 2 years' time, the world will have gathered as much information as it has in all of history. New information in a mere 2 years. That's exponentially huge. And most of it is video. You know, the internet passed the 50% video mark several years back now. So, and we know this. I mean, I'm a surfer. The other day, boom, a shark attack in front of millions in a surf contest. You just wouldn't see that kind of stuff captured before, but now you do, don't you?
Yeah. Because everyone has a smartphone with a camera.
Yep.
And yeah, it's kind of interesting because that's like a major disruption,
a serious game changer
in not just across religion, but across everything.
Across everything. The amount of knowledge out there, and because we're so early into this, we don't quite know how to cope with it. Okay,
right.
But if we just talk about a few things, what do people do on websites? They surf the website to bring up the surfing thing.
Yeah,
and that means jumping between sites. And if you climb into pretty much any site in the world, it has what we call a bounce rate. Are you familiar with the...
Yeah.
I'll just explain. Bounce rate means I come to the first page and I leave it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I never go any further. I just do a brief scan of it. And there's millions of websites out there that have a bounce rate of like 70 or 80%. In other words, 70 or 80% of visitors come there and leave. They've all got ADD. Attention
absolutely.
deficit.
Because it's true, because one of the examples that you gave is that when television came about, there was a lot of, I guess, cultural critics and kind of pundits who were like, what does this mean?
Yep.
And then it just became so ubiquitous with our everyday existence that that cultural criticism just
died away.
Died away. And from that to the internet is not a very long time if you compare from the book to the television.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, a very good point, actually, because let's say the book comes out and there's a small discussion between Plato and a few intellectuals in, the Parthenon in Greece or something like that, but hardly worldwide discussion. Then we come to the impact of television and Neil Postman in his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, which tells you something, doesn't it? And he had that debate on television, but that was like in the 70s or 80s, might have been in the 80s, when the debate was sort of still alive, and now television is so much part of us. We still sort of question it, and television is still strong. Now the internet's come along, and we're having this discussion here, and plenty of other people worldwide are having a discussion about the impact of the internet. But if I look at my 2-year-old grandson, to him, he's there, we're at his little birthday party, we take a movie or a photo of him on my smartphone, he intuitively just knows it's there. So he just runs around to have a look at it and sort of points, waves his finger over the phone and, oh, Daddy, and he'll see things like that. So for him, the internet is and the smartphone is just
given.
It's a given.
Yeah. No, that's a great example actually, because I was listening to another podcast in the States, and one of the girls was talking about how her younger brother was taking pictures on his smartphone.
Yep.
And, it made that click noise.
Right.
And he's like, why is it making that weird noise?
Good point, yeah. That's there for us. It's there for us, not him.
Yeah, not knowing that that's the shutter of the camera that is supposed to replicate.
The mimicry of the previous device.
Right. But that is not in...
His wavelength. Why does the thing click? Good point, love it.
Yeah.
I'll tell that story.
Yeah, because it's... if you don't know that, then it would seem weird
Yeah.
You know, like, why is it making that noise?
I know, and these hangovers that we have to deal with. I mean, a good one is
I
the
like that,
QWERTY,
hangovers.
the QWERTY layer of the keyboard. The QWERTY layer was designed to slow you down on the keyboard because these things jumped out, the little keys jumped out, and it would jam the keyboard. And so it was deliberately put there to slow you down. Now, when the golf ball typewriter came along, it didn't jam. But the QWERTY keyboard was there to stay, man, and it's with us to this day.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, was like in the 90s, I got that, like, you know, software to like learn how to type faster.
Yeah,
and then it's all QWERTY based, you know.
I know. Yeah, yeah.
10-finger.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of strange because you're right that, you know, it's still so new, and new stuff is coming out every day.
Yep.
That people have to learn to cope with it, especially because it is disrupting those old notions, which is even as recent as the sound that a camera makes when taking photos.
And one of the themes in the book is the increasing speed of disruption. And I use that analogy of the 50 million users. You know, how long does it take to reach 50 million users? And there's a lot of angles to that. You know, how many years it took to get to television, and so we've got this increasing speed. But if you just imagine, I just strike a metaphor, go back into the Middle Ages with the invention of something like the stirrup. The stirrup in the horse is such a key advance because it enabled you to literally stand on your horse. You know, it kept mobility there, and if you were standing there, you could fight with your sword. You didn't, you know, your balance was good, and the stirrup was such a key advance. Okay, now the stirrup may have been the only advance in the 100 years. Say an old man, you know, you can imagine this old man talking to his grandson, and he said, I remember when the stirrup came, I was 25 years old, you know, and he's like 80, and nothing else new has happened in his, you know, nothing else, just the stirrup. Yeah. That was the only disruptive change in that entire life. And roll forward to today, man, and what do we hear? One of the most common things I hear from older people, because I try to keep up with technologies, how do you keep up?
Right.
How do you keep up?
So it's the opposite.
It's the opposite. There's just so much coming at them. I'm teaching people about the cloud and things like this. And young people, they look at these old people and they kind of scoff at them, not realizing that with the given pace of technology, you know, in 40 years, they're going to be saying, how do you keep up?
Exactly. No, I feel the same way already, because I got on Facebook when in 2008, because I went to the American high school and everyone was on Facebook, and at that time here, people were on this site called Bebo.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah. And then I was over there like maybe 6 months on Facebook.
Yep.
Everyone that was on Bebo here that I knew jumped onto Facebook.
Just like that.
Yeah. And I'm still kind of stuck in that level of social media.
Yes.
Where like things like hashtags and Twitters and like Instagram and like all these other things. I mean, like I kind of understand them, but you know, it's kind of like
I know.
too much. Like, why do you need that?
Yeah. Yeah.
But obviously it is very popular and is being used and utilized. But like that's one of the things you also say in your last chapter, which is very fascinating, is that these technologies or like innovations that came about, they found their need in the culture. Like it didn't come out of a need, but it kind of found its need.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one. There's various things there. Like, I mean, there's so many software products made these days that there's no need for them. The world is awash in software, but some of them seem to strike a chord, or take Vine, for example. I think it's Vine, and Vine, you roll down and the video plays for
6 seconds.
6 seconds or something like that, and then you move on to the next one.
Right.
And who would have thought that could be a desirable thing? But looking back, there's some logic to it with our ADD. We just want 6 seconds, we just, boom, quick. We take a Twitter 140 characters. And so it becomes this thing, and now we can't do without it. Or
right.
Is that part of what you... Yeah, I mean...
because the thing is, like video games, for example, right? It's like a huge part of like people's leisure time.
Yeah,
young people, but also they wouldn't have thought when, like, the first Pac-Man machine came around that you would have a professional video game industry where people are paid to compete.
Yes.
That industry did not exist.
I know.
I
know. It is astonishing, and there's actually a religious connection there. But the first thing is, I mean, look at, talking about the 50 million user level. The current record is held by Angry Birds, for crying out loud.
Right.
35 days to reach 50 million. It's complete. No, I'm not allowed to, But anyway, make your own decision about Angry Birds. But it's a game. Now, what's happened, and this is part of this whole media shift, is that the gaming thing has impacted religion. And there are people out there, for example, who say, with some justification, that the ISIS people, the terrible people up in the in Iraq and that, they're not basing their stuff on the Quran, they're basing it on video games. And that's a very interesting comment.
That's interesting, eh?
Because there's an element of truth to it, and there's a few reports come out about how these guys in their spare time, they're all hunched around a jolly console. And so they make spiritual connections because they see things in media. And it's not too hard to make a jump from Star Wars to a video, and I'm not suggesting there's any linkage, in that. I'm just talking metaphorically, about a movie and a game, and suddenly you've got a bunch of young guys who almost think they're playing a game in the desert, and it's not a game.
Right. It's kind of interesting, eh? Because video games, I feel, are basically a step up from movies in terms of it's interactive.
You gotta ask. Is it Grand Theft Auto is one of the greatest hits of all time, isn't it? Apparently it grosses far more than most movies. So I hear what you're saying. Right.
And and it's I had never heard that ISIS theory about video games.
No, it's actually there's a young guy who's written some quite good stuff about this. It's around the net. And I think there is a point. I think
because that is now widespread as well. You know?
Well, World of Warcraft, for example, that's a well established one. Now, I don't know World of Warcraft, but I guess it's a video game that is ranked up there. If you type in the words, I think it's like spiritual insight or something like that. I've got a blog on it. Top of the hit list is World of Warcraft.
Wow. Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Huh. Although it's kind of interesting that it's not much different. I mean, it is, but not much different to kind of, being huddled in a temple studying.
I hear what you're saying.
A book.
We've got this. They were surrounded by their media, weren't they? They were impacted by the various elements that were in their environment. And so today, people are impacted by those elements. That's the basis of what you're saying, isn't
Right?
it?
Yeah. And
And
so-
not only that, but I mean, the all these little social media things are being actually introduced, actively into the church. With all their, and there is. I understand there are some a bit off the topic perhaps, but some congregations out there that can sit in the church and they can tweet, questions and updates up into a screen behind the pastor as he's preaching. So It's kind of like, whoa, man, you're online now. All of these things. So, and at the ugly end of the scale, there's these boys in the desert playing video games and bombing others. Yeah.
Right. It's kind of interesting that you you mentioned that as well in terms of adopting social media into the religious framework has been like, it's like almost like they've had no choice because of the pace that it has gathered in society otherwise, leading to Bible and Quran ebooks as well as Christian and Islamic apps.
Yes.
There's a bunch of apps about Hinduism that I'm aware of.
There's hundreds. It's wider than that. The whole interest in religion and digital media is huge. I mean, mine isn't the only book by any means. And there are organisations out there that's taught in universities. There's all kinds of things going on about this. But and the digital media. I mean, clearly the digital media really changes the rules about, for example, copying. Copying and destroying.
Right, it does.
So we're actually, at least with a printed book, here's the printer. Sure, we can print it, but the price is no longer equivalent to thousands or tens of thousands of whatever your denomination was. Imagine buying a hand-printed one. It's going to a machine-printed one is down to, say, $20, $30, right? A digital one is a zero, man. It doesn't cost you anything to reproduce it. It doesn't cost you anything to reproduce it or anything to destroy it.
Right.
So that raises that question, like the burning of a Quran or the burning of a Bible is the destruction of that, which has this history. But so far I haven't heard of anyone being prosecuted or being libelled for deleting the Quran off their smartphone or off their computer.
Right. What a strange thing, eh?
Well, we gotta go over to memory here, eh?
Yeah.
And the thing is that
That's true.
It's too big a job to run round chasing up people that have deleted a Quran off their smartphone. Yeah. Although interestingly, if you had to agree to all the permissions, they could track you down. It's too big. And if it's too big to handle, it gets dropped.
Yeah.
It just fades away, and we have an example of that and I'm straying here, but they have an example of that, a very important one with the banning of interest by banks. And churches used to prohibit making interest on money. It was evil, and it's all there in the Bible.
Yeah.
But when the banks took it on, it was just too big, man. And so the prohibition just faded away, and we laughed that it was ever there.
Yeah.
And that's an example of memory at work, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh man. So like in the book you mention the access of the smartphone and kind of media technology in Muslim majority countries.
Yeah, well,
and how it's having an impact on their culture.
First thing is, and it is, and let's not get into predicting too much. If we come back to the numbers, first of all, the numbers are interesting because I've been in the computer game a long time, from mainframes to mobile. But let's move from mainframes to PCs, and then the price of personal computers dropped, and the very word personal computer came into being. So they went into houses.
Yeah.
But really they went into first world houses, because they were still like $1,000 or more, and that was a bit tough for...
Yeah.
And then along came the mobile world, and it's which is a personal computer that's actually classed as a personal computer, a mobile phone, because it's a computer, and it's
Basically,
personal.
yeah.
So
You
the
carry it in your
rise of
pocket.
those is phenomenal, not only in the West, but in the South, or the third world, or the poor world, or whatever you call it. And so it's becoming a ubiquitous item all around. And there's little examples that pop up, like, there was some Islamists took over Timbuktu, and a lot of the girls that were living in Timbuktu had a smartphone and had music on it, just chimes, and the Islamist boys went out rooting out that and deleting stuff, So that's just little clashes of, things around the place. Of course it's going to have an impact, because it is an door to the world. You've got this smartphone, and if you've got some internet coverage, come on, you are going to be able to see what other people do. Yeah. And you're going to, to be blunt, you're either going to increase the envy or the hate.
Yeah.
It's, because you're going to see things that you can't afford, or you're going to see things that disgust you, or you see things you envy, or all sorts of things like that.
That's true. Because, going back to medium as the message, the smartphone as a medium, because of it being so ubiquitous throughout the world, and all the cultures of the world, having their own kind of memories and mythologies, and all that stuff, is like the same disruption is caused by this smartphone. But
there's many angles to it.
There's so many. I'm I guess trying to say that different cultures will adopt it in a different way.
Yes, that's always going to be the case. Different demographics.
Yeah, demographics. That's what I'm
and
saying.
Let's just take one out of the religious sphere. I'm an aging surfer. I ride waves, rightio.
Yeah.
So I follow the annual surf contest thing around the world. It's all internet based. There's not enough money in surfing to get on TV. So they've gone straight to the internet, and they do huge, and they'll have 10 million people watch at a time, and you can hook your PC up to your TV, or you can watch it on your smartphone. They've got a brilliant app, and so that has been a huge game changer in that sport.
Yeah.
So when somebody does something today, getting back to your mimicry, so when somebody does what's called an aerial, they spin in the air and they come down and land on their feet, and they can do it 1.5 times or something.
Yeah.
That's seen by millions of other surfers instantly. Boom, man, does that increase the competitive nature and the spread of tricks and all kinds of things.
Yeah, all that stuff.
So if you come to, the smartphone, and we have one example of there's been an Islamic smartphone introduced, and it's full of things on there to sort of help you with prayers and various stuff like that. Now, first of all, and you've got to get back to the disruption thing, because we're so used to being disrupted. There's no 200-year gap here anymore between accepting the book, rightio. As soon as that Islamic smartphone came out, boom, they were lining up with orders for it. So that's the first point. The second one is, the really founder of it says, this is going to help people with their spiritual life. But really, the smartphone is designed to interrupt you.
Yes.
It's designed to interrupt you. And you'll be in a client. This happens millions of places around the world every day. Business meetings, and the phone rings. And they pick up the phone and answer it. They'll break into a personal conversation that we're having. We all do it, right? Or you go to your smartphone and you want to have this, meditative time, but you find you've got a LinkedIn invitation, or you need an update to the app, and it is the smartphone is not there to be a reflective device to help you on your spiritual journey.
No.
It's there to interrupt you.
It's true, man. Because, like, I mean, like, this is like, or because of the social aspect of
Yeah.
those things,
Mm.
you are kind of interrupted as well. It's like, ooh, like, I wonder what this person's
Yeah.
doing, or like, you know, how this thing that this other person was going to do turned out.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and like all those things, which interrupt you from
Yeah.
any.
And another thing is, and this is a youthful thing that everyone knows about. It actually enables you to avoid conversation. Strange to say, because the modern youth, a lot of them don't use the phone to talk; they use it to text.
That's true.
So now we're back to like they're too frightened to do that. And once you get into text, you introduce this huge thing: text bullying, text misunderstanding. You know, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, because you can't read
Yeah.
the person.
I know.
You're reading the
Exactly.
text, and that can be.
And that's huge.
Yeah.
You know, because linguists will tell us that you only convey so much in text. So you and I are talking, we see each other. This is called F to F, face to face.
Yeah.
And we've had millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years of practice in our culture of face to face. I see a
Yes.
slight smile, you move, you know, I can pick up a whole lot of vibes from the way as you are with me
Yeah.
in this conversation. All of that is dropped with words.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of interesting, because like we are moving into, I guess, that realm, because
We're moving into an image-dominated society. We're moving out of a text-dominated one. It's tempting to look back and think that the text-dominated one was best. Perhaps that's just sort of golden memory kind of thing, you know, it was always that way. And I'm not saying that it's going to be an evil world because it's image-dominated. I'm just saying we're moving into an image-dominated one.
Right. And obviously that will have its own ramifications on our existing mythologies and memories.
Huge. And particularly when they get interrupted all the time. Because you're halfway through something, or you bounce off the page and you go, you know, so there's this not only, you know, interrupted, disrupted, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
You know.
And the thing is that with the advent of Google, knowledge, you know, can be pulled up from existing data.
Oh, I know.
Which is like a crazy thing, because like if I spend enough time and effort, you know, watching YouTube videos or reading, then I can learn a completely new skill.
Yes, you can.
Just from that.
Yep.
You know, it's and you know, like in the past, I would have had to have a teacher, an institution to you know, achieve that same skill.
Yep.
So,
and that's all. That in many ways is a very helpful part. But if you were to measure, in actual fact, what happens is that mostly we've learned to trivia. You know, we put up little videos of dogs running around and doing funny things,
and they get millions of hits.
You know, babies laughing. I mean, the laughing babies ones, they're cute to watch. And every day, millions of people link millions of such videos to each other. They don't link a training video on something.
Yeah, exactly. That's what there was, I guess, a stat or like a funny meme about YouTube views where they like had this stupid video of like He-Man breaking into song. Or something, which millions of views.
Yeah.
And then the other one was the Dalai Lama explains the concept of happiness.
Yes.
Which had like 3,000 views.
Yeah. Oh,
it's interesting.
Oh,
like that whole like
the numbers,
trivia thing.
I understand that every day of the year, 200 man years, in other words, you know what a man year is of work or effort, or 200 man years are consumed playing Angry Birds. Every single day.
Wow. What a strange time.
Yeah, and it's interesting how, and perhaps it was foreseen, Thoreau back in the 1850s or 60s, and he commented, he had a famous comment about the telegraph linking Maine and Texas. What has Maine to say to Texas? But he had another one when he heard about the cable crossing the Atlantic. And he said, I suspect that the first news that will come on will be that the Princess Adelaide has the whooping cough. Yeah. In other words, he was saying trivia will be there. So now I use the analogy of smoke signals. Smoke signals is a long distance medium. The next tribe can see it, but there's not much you can convey in a smoke signal. But you can convey all well or danger. Yeah. And these are important things because your bandwidth is so narrow. When your bandwidth is like that, boom, it's just full of trivia.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that has been the case since the inception of like that kind of media.
Yeah, and that's why I say, and I try to get this analogy. We talk about the information highway, which is actually a term that's not used so much today, but it was 20 years ago. It's 20 years ago this year that Bill Gates wrote The Road Ahead. And it was a very influential book, 1995, and there he is on the cover of this book, and it's a good book to read. And there's this straight road behind him disappearing into the desert. Well, first of all, it's never straight. The information highway is never straight. It's got bends all over the place. Yeah. Okay. And secondly, I maintain the churches and Islam or religions have been on the information highway a long, long time because information or knowledge is their prime asset. And if you think about the things that have, caused them to turn corners on their highway, and so learning from those past corners that they've turned, we get a feel for the ones they're negotiating today.
Right, and I guess there's no way to truly foresee or predict.
No, I
don't. Where all this is headed.
Futurism is a tricky thing. Did you realize statistically, if you add up all the futurist predictions, statistically most of them don't happen. So it doesn't pay to be a futurist. But I do like, and it's a saying I stole off somewhere, I forget, is that the best we can do is try and predict the present.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Because you see, life is not like a snapshot. If you go out and look at life, it's like coming into a movie theatre and the film's already going. You didn't see the beginning, and you watch it for a while, and you leave before it ends because there is no finish. And you're making a basis, and that's what analysing life is, particularly in these days.
Yeah, especially when you have the existing memory of the past, which has been stored in books and existing cultural traditions and the mythology of now.
Exactly, and so it's small wonder in everyone's busy lives, with all this knowledge out there, that you're going to retreat back to what you deem the significant things. We could call this fundamentals, Yeah. I mean, if you're surrounded by a world of chaos, to get your identity point is important.
Right, right. And, it's like all this stuff is very fascinating to me. And I do, follow some, futurist theories or, predictions. One of the ones which I think is possible within our lifetime is the advent of AI.
Yeah.
Which will pose a whole nother bunch of
and there's a lot of people
questions.
Working on it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people working on it. Did you see those cool images of the Google neural networks?
No, but I know that.
Yeah,
I understand. I shouldn't say that. I understand Google is working on AI.
Yeah,
a lot of it. Yeah. They must be, because they've got the Google Drive cars out around.
Right.
And that's artificial intelligence in a car, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh man, it's but we'll see, and
it's going to be in our houses too.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're going to analyse our health by hooking up to the loo, and they're going to compare that to what's sitting in our fridge, and they're going to come up with a remedy, which is probably flown to your door with a drone if you take out the premium insurance plan.
That would be a sci-fi world.
Yeah.
That would be, because not long ago, this was sci-fi.
Yes, that's true.
You know?
That's true. Absolutely. This very thing of being recorded on... And we've forgotten the huge impact of television or even photographs. So people go into castles today, and I only found this out a few years ago. You see the full, image of the guy there, or you see his head,
Yeah.
And we have the saying, cost an arm and a leg. And that actually came from that art world in those days. These guys went around the rich and they had a set fee, so many pounds for just a head portrait, so many pounds for the two arms included. And so if you wanted the full body, you got the arm and a leg, cost you an arm and a leg. But then when the neighbours came visiting, they saw you and they knew that it was all a status thing, you see. And so they had just as much ego as the selfie generation. So we accuse the young with their endless selfies of, they're not. They just have the means to do it.
Right.
That's all.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, and that means, which was the original photograph.
Yeah.
Which was the painting or the portrait.
Yep.
Can now be accessed by millions through their smartphones.
Yep.
And
displayed on YouTube or Instagram.
Yeah. So wild. Well, man, I guess we can keep talking forever about all these sorts of topics.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on the show. It's been really good.
Oh no, it was great. And I would definitely love to have you on again to just do a techno philosophy special or something,
Oh, well, we'll see.
It's so much fun.
Always that.
But so, anyways, what would be the last thing that you would like to leave with the listeners and our viewers in terms of the gist of the book? Because
people often ask. I mean, the book is here's a copy of it here. It's 120,000 words, and it comes in a Kindle form as well, from Amazon. And people ask me, well, what does it say? And I'm like, 120,000 words. How can I put that into a Twitter?
Into a tweet,
into a tweet, and I don't know, which is why I've sort of come down to just using that phrase, "religion's on the information highway," or merely the first one, the bishop. That's one religion, the mullah another, and the smartphone, which is the digital world, and readers are not coming away. There's no answer at the end. There's no grand solution about what we should do. The book is there to...
I actually like how you end it.
Do you? Okay. Well, I deliberately ended on a fast-paced note because life is fast-paced, and it's sped up in the last chapter.
And it's accelerating.
It ends. So I'm glad you picked that up. It's nice to get feedback like that.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it was great. So definitely worth checking out and reading. Now, you're going to have a launch on the 29th?
Yes, that's
at
here,
the library?
Tauranga Library, July 29th, 5:15 p.m.
And would the books be available through the library or for sale somewhere where you'd like to?
Yeah, I've got a few books that I can sell to people on the spot, and then people sometimes want one because they want a signature in it, and that's but this is it's a global book, and it's going around the world, so all that's sort of handled through the Amazon thing. But for a launch, of course, an author has a few books there.
Yeah. Cool, awesome. So people can find the book on Amazon.
Yep,
that's the main.
Yeah, just type in Bishop Mullah
Smartphone.
That'll get you there. Or actually, Bishop Mullah will do the trick.
Bishop Mullah. All
Yeah.
right, cool. So yeah, it's definitely a fascinating book, and like, you know, there's so much more stuff that I want to talk to you about, which we will save for part 2, if there is one, and who knows, by that time we would have AI.
Okay, very good. Very good. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Bryan. This was awesome. All right, catch you guys later.